The air in Mrs. Albright's garden was thick with the sweet, cloying perfume of blooming hydrangeas and the savory promise of grilling burgers. It was the kind of idyllic Saturday afternoon that seemed manufactured for a postcard, a perfect snapshot of suburban bliss in our quiet corner of Millbrook. I stood at the epicenter of a small constellation of women I called my friends, a glass of chilled rosé sweating in my hand, its condensation a cool relief against my skin. The laughter was light, effervescent, and mostly it was directed at me, or rather, at the anecdotes I spun with the practiced ease of a court jester. Across the manicured lawn, Caleb, my husband, was stationed at the grill. He was a picture of earnest devotion, flipping patties with a focused brow, his shoulders relaxed as he chatted amiably with the other husbands. He wore the blue linen shirt I'd picked out for him, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with fine dark hair. He caught my eye from across the sea of smiling faces and offered me that smile, the one that had first disarmed me 5 years ago in a crowded college library. It was warm, genuine, and contained a universe of affection meant only for me. A different woman, a better woman, would have smiled back. She would have excused herself, walked across the grass, and pressed a kiss to his cheek, a silent thank you for being the steady, wonderful man he was. I was not that woman. Instead, I let a theatrical roll of my eyes serve as my response before turning back to my audience, the rosé glass a prop in my hand. "You simply will not believe what Caleb did last week," I began, my voice pitched to Carrie, a conspiratorial blend of amusement and disdain that I had perfected over time. It was my signature performance, the exhausted but adored wife. I mentioned, just offhandedly mind you, I continued, leaning in as if sharing a state secret, that I was craving sushi from that place in the city. You know the one, Aoki, where you have to book a table 3 months in advance. A chorus of appreciative murmurs went through the group. Brielle, my self-proclaimed best friend, gasped with performative envy. "No! How did he manage it?" I took a delicate sip of my wine. "Oh, you know Caleb. He apparently called in some massive favor with a client, pulled strings I didn't even know existed. The next day, he surprises me with a reservation for that very evening. A little velvet box on my pillow, not with jewelry, but with a reservation card inside." The women cooed. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard," one of them sighed. But I wasn't finished. This was the punchline. And get this, I lowered my voice, making them lean closer. "We get all the way into the city, I'm in my new dress, he's in his best suit, and as we're walking up to the restaurant, I wasn't feeling it anymore. The thought of raw fish suddenly turned my stomach. I paused for effect, watching their faces. I told him I wanted Italian instead. The silence was rapt. "And what did he do?" Brielle prompted, her eyes wide. I laughed, a sound that I intended to be light and careless, but now, in retrospect, sounded brittle and cruel. "What do you think he did? He just smiled that goofy smile of his, canceled our impossible to get reservation without a single complaint, and took me to that little trattoria down the street. Didn't even sigh." I shook my head, feigning exasperation. "I swear that man would bend himself into a pretzel if I asked him to. Sometimes I wonder if he has any backbone at all." The laughter that followed was sharp and immediate, a cackle of shared, cynical amusement. It was the validation I craved, the proof that I was the one in control, the one with the adoring, pliable husband. The sound, however, was violently cut short by a sudden, profound silence that fell over our group like a heavy shroud. My own laughter died in my throat. I turned, a cold dread coiling in my stomach, a serpent waking from a long slumber. And there he was. Caleb stood just a few feet away, a platter laden with perfectly grilled burgers held in his hands. His face, usually so open and warm, was a mask of utter devastation. It wasn't anger I saw, not yet. It was something far worse. A deep, hollowed-out hurt that seemed to extinguish the light in his kind brown eyes. The platter in his hands trembled, a slight, almost imperceptible motion that betrayed the seismic shock running through him. The world seemed to narrow to the space between us, the cheerful sounds of the party fading into a dull, distant roar. "Caleb," I began, my voice a strangled whisper. I was just joking." He cut me off, not with words, but with a sharp, definitive shake of his head. His jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle flexing beneath his skin. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and controlled, a shard of ice in the warm summer air. Now, he didn't wait for a reply. He turned and began walking toward the far end of the yard, expecting me to follow. As I moved, I could feel the weight of every gaze at the party on my back, burning holes in my dress. My cheeks flushed with a humiliating heat, a mixture of shame and a lingering, foolish denial. Surely, this was just a bigger fight than usual. Surely he would forgive me. He always did. We stopped behind a tall, fragrant wall of Mrs. Albright's prize-winning rose bushes, hidden from view. He set the plate of burgers down on a nearby stone bench with a clatter that sounded unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. He turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw that the warmth in his eyes had not just been extinguished. It had been replaced by a chilling, distant coldness. "I'm done, Alara," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Yet each word landed like a physical blow. I blinked, my mind refusing to process the statement. "What do you mean, done?" "I mean done with this marriage," he clarified, his voice gaining a hard, brittle edge. "Done being your punching bag. Done being the butt of your jokes for the entertainment of your vapid friends. Done being disrespected by you, and, by extension, by everyone you've taught to see me as a spineless fool." The world tilted on its axis. "Caleb, come on," I stammered, stumbling back a step. "It was just a joke. You know I didn't mean it." "Didn't mean what, Alara?" His voice rose, laced with years of suppressed pain. "Didn't mean to humiliate me in front of our neighbors? Didn't mean to paint me as a pathetic man-child who exists only to serve your whims? Didn't mean to take my love for you, the deepest, most sincere thing in my life, and hold it up for public ridicule?" Tears, hot and shameful, sprang to my eyes. "Caleb, please. I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "That's the problem," he finally exploded, the controlled facade shattering. "You never realize. You never ever stop to think about how your actions affect anyone but yourself, how they affect me." He raked a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I recognized as a sign of his deepest frustration. "I have put up with it for years, Alara. The little digs, the eye rolls, the funny stories. I tolerated it, thinking that if I just loved you enough, if I just tried hard enough, you'd eventually see me, really see me. But you don't, do you?" I reached out to touch his arm, a desperate, instinctual gesture. He flinched away as if my hand were a hot iron. The rejection sent a spike of pure agony through my heart, sharper than any insult. "Caleb, I do see you. I love you. Please, let's just go home and talk about this." He shook his head, a bitter, mirthless smile twisting his lips. "There's nothing left to talk about. I'm leaving. When you get home, your things will be packed and waiting for you on the porch. I don't want you in the house anymore." The finality in his voice was absolute. This wasn't one of our usual arguments, where my tears could manipulate a truce or where he would eventually cave just to keep the peace. This was an ending. This was the sound of a foundation cracking beyond repair. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice rising in panic. "Caleb, this is our home, our life. You can't just throw it all away over one stupid comment." "It's not just one comment, Alara," he said, his eyes filled with a profound, weary sadness that broke my heart all over again. "It's years of comments, years of disrespect, years of me giving every single piece of myself to this relationship while you just take and take and take." He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and the pain in his gaze made my breath catch in my throat. "I love you, Alara. God help me, I probably always will. But I can't do this anymore. I won't." With that, he turned and walked away. He left me standing alone among the roses, their sweet scent suddenly feeling like a funeral wreath. I watched, paralyzed, as he navigated his way back through the crowd, stopping only briefly to murmur a goodbye to our hosts before his determined figure disappeared down the street, heading toward our house. Our house. The thought jolted me into action. I hurried after him, ignoring the curious stares and whispered condemnations from our neighbors. The short walk felt like a mile, each step heavier than the last. By the time I reached our quaint two-story colonial, the home we'd bought just a year ago, the front door was already closed. I burst through it, calling his name, my voice echoing in the sudden stillness of the foyer. The sight that greeted me in the living room stopped me dead in my tracks. It was real. This was happening. Caleb was there, methodically, emotionlessly, packing my clothes into my suitcases. The sickening crunch of my heart shattering echoed through my ears as I watched the life we had built being folded away, piece by painful piece. "My name is Alara. I'm 23 years old, and I think I just ruined my entire life." The world inside our home was silent save for the soft rustle of fabric and the decisive click of latches. It was a sterile, procedural sound that was somehow more brutal than shouting would have been. Caleb moved with a grim efficiency, folding my sweaters, my dresses, my life into neat, manageable squares. He was not angry anymore. He was a man performing a necessary unpleasant task. It was the detached calm of a surgeon amputating a gangrenous limb. "Caleb, stop," I pleaded, my voice thin and reedy. I rushed forward, my hand reaching for a silk blouse he was in the middle of folding. "Please, let's just talk about this. We can fix this." He jerked the shirt away from my grasp, his jaw tight. "There's nothing to talk about, Alara. I've made my decision." Desperation, sharp and clawing, rose in my throat. "But you can't just kick me out," I cried, the injustice of it stinging more than the shame. "This is my home too." He paused in his packing then, and his eyes, when they met mine, were hard as stone. "Actually, it's not," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The house is in my name, remember? You insisted on it. You said you didn't want to be tied down to a mortgage." The memory of that conversation flooded back, scalding me with its irony. I had pushed for it, arguing it was better for our finances, a smarter move. But the truth, the ugly secret truth, was that I had wanted an easy out, a clean break if things ever got tough. I never in a million years imagined the escape hatch I had built for myself would be the very one he would use to eject me from our life. It was a devastating, perfectly executed checkmate in a game I hadn't even realized we were playing. "Caleb, please," I begged, the tears that had been welling now streaming freely down my face. The carefully constructed facade of the confident, witty woman at the party had crumbled, leaving behind a terrified, pathetic girl. "I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll change. Just give me another chance." For a fleeting, torturous moment, I thought I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a shadow of the man who loved me, the man who always forgave me. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, extinguished by a steely resolve. He shook his head. "I've given you chances, Ilara. More chances than I should have. It's too late now." He finished with the clothes and moved on to my personal items from the bathroom, the bedroom. My favorite vanilla-scented perfume, the silver-backed hairbrush that had been a gift from my grandmother, the collection of novels stacked on my nightstand. I watched helplessly as he efficiently packed away the artifacts of my existence within these walls. The surreal nature of the situation made me feel like I was watching a movie of someone else's life falling apart. He would occasionally ask a quiet, practical question. "Do you want this in the small case or the large one?" And the sheer mundanity of it all felt like a special kind of madness. As the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows across our once happy home, Caleb carried the last of my suitcases to the front porch. I stood in the doorway, a ghost in my own house, feeling lost and impossibly small. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He sighed then, a deep, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of our entire relationship. He ran a hand over his face, and for the first time, I noticed how tired he looked. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper, etched by years of quiet disappointment I had been too self-absorbed to see. "Call your parents, Alara," he said, his voice softening just a fraction. "Or one of your friends. I don't know, but you can't stay here." "And what about us?" I asked, clinging to the last frayed shred of hope. "Is this really it?" He looked at me then, his gaze direct and unwavering, and I saw a lifetime of love and a universe of pain in his eyes. "Yeah, Alara," he said softly. "This is really it. I'll have my lawyer draw up the divorce papers next week." With that, he gently but firmly guided me out of the doorway and onto the porch. He didn't slam the door. He closed it softly, and then I heard the distinct, chilling click of the deadbolt sliding into place. The sound echoed with a terrible finality, a full stop at the end of a chapter I never wanted to end. I sank down onto the cold porch steps, surrounded by the hastily packed luggage that represented my life. The evening air was growing cool, and the cheerful sounds from Mrs. Albright's party had long since faded, replaced by the chirping of crickets. The weight of my actions, of years of thoughtlessness and casual cruelty, crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't one comment. He was right. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a death by 1,000 moments of disrespect, and I had been the one holding the knife. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed my father's number. "Dad?" I said when he answered, my voice choked with sobs, the word barely recognizable. "Can you come get me? I've made a terrible, terrible mistake." The next few days passed in a blurry, monochrome haze of tears and regret. My parents welcomed me back into their home with open arms and aching hearts. I found myself installed in my old childhood bedroom, a time capsule of a girl I barely recognized. The walls were still the same cheerful yellow, now faded at the edges, and the faded posters of long-forgotten bands seemed to mock me with their youthful optimism. It was a room built for teenage anxieties about proms and final exams, not for the soul-crushing despair of a failed marriage at 23. I could see the disappointment etched into the lines of my parents' faces. They had always adored Caleb, viewing him as the steady, kind son they never had. As I recounted the events of that Saturday, omitting none of my own culpability, I saw them struggling to reconcile the daughter they raised with the cruel woman I had become. They were kind, but their quiet sorrow was a more potent condemnation than any lecture could have been. My phone buzzed constantly, a relentless stream of messages from the friends who had been my audience at the barbecue. Most were a nauseating mix of feigned concern and thinly veiled curiosity, hungry for the juicy details of my marital implosion. Brielle, in particular, sent a flurry of texts offering hollow words of support. "He's overreacting, Alara. He'll come crawling back," one read. But as the days bled into one another and the stark reality of my situation sank in, I began to see these friendships for what they truly were. Shallow connections built on a foundation of gossip and mutual self-interest. They didn't care about my pain. They were just thrilled to have front-row seats to the drama. The real turning point, the moment the fog of my self-pity began to clear, came on a trip to the kitchen for a glass of water late one night. I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the doorframe, as I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the living room. "I just don't understand how she could have been so thoughtless," my mother was saying, her voice thick with sadness. "We raised her better than that." My father sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "I know, dear. But Alara's always been, well, you know how she island, always wanting to be the center of attention, never really thinking about how her actions affect others." "But Caleb," my mother replied, and I could hear the tears in her voice now. "He was so good to her, so patient. Remember how he used to bring her breakfast in bed every Sunday, even when she was grumpy? Or how he'd surprise her with little gifts for no reason at all?" "I know," my father said softly. "He loved her more than anything, and she just threw it all away." I retreated back to my room before they could hear me, their words ringing in my ears like a death knell. They hadn't said anything I didn't already know, but hearing the truth articulated so plainly, so painfully, by the two people who loved me most in the world, shattered the last of my defenses. For the first time, I truly began to see myself through their eyes, through Caleb's eyes. The image wasn't just unflattering, it was grotesque. Unable to sleep, I did something I should have done days ago. I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen a harsh white in the darkness of my room, and started a new document. At the top, I typed a simple, damning title: "Ways I Hurt Caleb." As I began to write, the memories came flooding back, a torrent of shame. I listed the time I forgot his birthday dinner because Brielle invited me to a last-minute concert. I wrote about the way I belittled his passion for woodworking, calling it a dusty old man hobby. I detailed all the times I had dismissed his feelings, put my own trivial desires above his needs, and taken his unwavering love for granted, treating it not as a gift to be cherished, but as a resource to be endlessly consumed. The document grew longer and longer. By the time the first faint rays of dawn began to peek through my curtains, I had filled page after page with my transgressions. Reading through the list was like a punch to the gut. It was a comprehensive, undeniable indictment of my character. How had I become this person? How had I allowed myself to treat someone I claimed to love with such callous disregard? With shaking hands, I reached for my phone. My first instinct, my selfish instinct, was to call him, to read him the list, to beg for forgiveness. I knew it was early, but I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to talk to him, to unburden myself. But as I pulled up his contact, my thumb hovering over the call button, I hesitated. What right did I have to disturb his peace? What right did I have to force him to confront the pain I had caused him all over again, just to make myself feel better? In that moment of hesitation, I realized that my desire to call him was just another selfish act in a long, unbroken chain of them. I wanted to ease my own guilt, not his pain. With a heavy heart, I put my phone down. For once in my life, I decided to put someone else's needs before my own. If Caleb wanted space, I would give him space. If he wanted to move on without me, as much as the thought tore me apart, I would have to respect his decision. Instead, I opened my laptop again and started a new document. This time, I titled it, How to Become a Better Person. It was time for me to do the hard, ugly work of self-reflection and personal growth. Not for Caleb, not to win him back, but for myself. Because I never ever wanted to be the kind of person who could hurt someone they loved like that again. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Life, with its relentless forward momentum, went on, even when it felt like my own world had ground to a halt. I remained at my parents' house, slowly, painstakingly, piecing together the shattered remnants of my life. The divorce proceedings were mercifully quick and straightforward. Caleb, ever the gentleman, didn't fight me on anything. He communicated only through his lawyer, a professional buffer that was both a kindness and a constant, painful reminder of the chasm between us. He even agreed to a small alimony payment to help me get on my feet, a gesture of grace that I felt I hadn't earned. His kindness, even in the face of our separation, was just another entry on the long list of what I had so carelessly thrown away. My first step toward independence was getting a job. It was an entry-level position at a local marketing firm, a humbling role that involved more data entry and coffee runs than creative strategy. But it was a start. For the first time in my adult life, I was supporting myself. I was learning the value of hard work, the quiet satisfaction of earning my own money, and the exhaustion that came with an 8-hour workday. My social life, once the vibrant center of my universe, had dwindled to almost nothing. Most of my so-called friends had drifted away once they realized I was no longer a source of gossip or entertainment. Brielle stuck around for a while, but even she eventually stopped calling when it became clear I was no longer interested in our old lifestyle of boozy brunches and mindless chatter. The silence and solitude, once my greatest fears, became my teachers. In the quiet of my room, with only my thoughts for company, I began the arduous work of self-improvement. I read self-help books, started journaling, and, in the bravest step of all, began seeing a therapist. Dr. Larson was a kind but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through my carefully constructed defenses. In our weekly sessions, she helped me unpack years of selfish behavior and skewed perceptions. "Alara," she said during one particularly difficult session, her voice gentle but firm, "have you ever considered why you felt the need to belittle Caleb in front of your friends?" I shrugged, picking at a loose thread on the arm of the chair. I guess I thought it made me look good, powerful. Like I had this great guy who would do anything for me, and I was so amazing that he put up with it. Dr. Larson nodded thoughtfully. "And how do you think that made Caleb feel?" The question, so simple and direct, hit me like a ton of bricks. For perhaps the first time in my life, I truly tried to put myself in Caleb's shoes. I imagined how it must have felt to constantly be the butt of jokes, to have his love and devotion mocked and taken for granted, to stand there, holding a plate of burgers he had grilled for everyone, and hear the woman he loved questioning his very manhood. "Horrible," I whispered, the word catching in my throat as tears welled in my eyes. It must have made him feel so small, so worthless. "Exactly," Dr. Larson said softly. "Alara, true love isn't about control or showing off. It's about mutual respect, support, and kindness. It's about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down." Her words stayed with me long after the session ended. I began to see all my past relationships not just with Caleb, but with friends and family as well in a new, harsh light. I realized how often I had prioritized my own needs and desires over everyone else's, how I had used people for my own gain without a thought for their feelings. It was a painful, ugly realization, but a necessary one. I knew that if I ever wanted to have healthy relationships in the future, I needed to make some serious, fundamental changes to the person I was. I dedicated myself to the process. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding a simple, uncomplicated joy in caring for creatures that ask for nothing but love and a gentle hand. I took up yoga and meditation, learning to quiet the constant, anxious chatter in my mind and find a measure of peace and stillness. I was slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding myself from the inside out. I was no longer the woman Caleb had left behind, but I wasn't yet sure who I was becoming. About 6 months after that fateful barbecue, I ran into Mrs. Albright at the local grocery store. I had been actively avoiding most of our old neighbors, too ashamed to face the pity or judgment in their eyes. But there was no escaping the kind-faced woman as she spotted me in the produce aisle, her shopping cart filled with vibrant vegetables. "Ilara, dear," she called out, pushing her cart towards me. "How are you?" I forced a smile, bracing myself for the awkward conversation ahead. "Hello, Mrs. Albright. I'm doing okay. How are you?" To my surprise, her face softened with genuine concern. "Oh, honey," she said, reaching out to pat my arm. Her touch was warm and motherly. "I've been worried about you. We all have." Her kindness, so unexpected and undeserved, brought a sudden rush of tears to my eyes. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, hastily wiping at my cheeks. I've made such a mess of everything." "Mrs." Albright glanced around, then gently steered me towards a quiet corner of the store, near the bulk bins of nuts and grains. "Listen, Ilara," she said, her voice low and kind. "We all make mistakes. Lord knows I've made my fair share. The important thing is that we learn from them." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Have you talked to Caleb recently?" she asked carefully. I shook my head. I've been giving him space. I don't think he wants to hear from me." "Mrs." Albright sighed. "You might be surprised, dear. He's been asking about you, you know." My head snapped up, a wild, foolish hope fluttering in my chest. "He has?" She nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. "He's worried about you. Asks my husband how you're doing whenever he sees him. Wants to know if you're okay." The knowledge that Caleb still cared enough to ask about me, even after everything I'd done, was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. It was just so Caleb, always thinking of others, even when they didn't deserve it. "I don't deserve his concern," I said softly. "Nonsense," Mrs. Albright clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "We all deserve compassion, Alara, especially when we've made mistakes." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notepad and pen. After quickly scribbling something down, she tore off the page and handed it to me. "This is Caleb's new number," she said. "He changed it a while back. I think he might appreciate hearing from you." I stared at the number, my heart racing. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. Mrs. Albright squeezed my arm gently. "You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it, okay?" I nodded, carefully folding the small piece of paper and tucking it into my pocket as if it were a fragile artifact. As she said her goodbyes and continued with her shopping, I stood there feeling as if the world had shifted on its axis. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the piece of paper. My phone lay beside it, a silent, accusing rectangle of glass and metal. What would I even say? How do you apologize for years of thoughtlessness in a single text message? In the end, I decided on simplicity and honesty. It felt cowardly, but I knew if I heard his voice, I might lose my nerve completely. My hands shook as I typed. "Caleb, it's Alara. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I completely understand if you don't respond. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for what happened at the barbecue, but for everything. For all the times I took you for granted. For all the times I made you feel less than the amazing person you are. You deserved so much better. I'm truly, deeply sorry for the pain I caused you. I hope you're doing well and finding the happiness you deserve." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then promptly threw my phone across the bed as if it had burned me. My heart was pounding against my ribs, and I felt slightly nauseous. What had I done? For the next few hours, I paced my room, waiting for a response that I knew might never come. As the night wore on, I began to accept it. He had moved on. And really, wasn't that what I wanted for him? To be happy, even if it meant a life without me in it. Just as I was about to give up and try to get some sleep, my phone lit up. My heart leaped into my throat. With trembling fingers, I opened the message. It was from him. "Ilara, thank you for your message. It means a lot to hear that from you. I hope you're doing well too. Take care." It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a small olive branch extended across the chasm I had created between us. As I lay in bed that night, rereading his words until they were burned into my memory, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. In the following weeks, I reconnected with an old acquaintance from the neighborhood, Leah. She had never been part of my inner circle, mainly because Betrayal had some sort of unexplained issue with her. Now, free from the toxic influence of my former friends, I found myself genuinely enjoying Leah's company. We met for coffee one afternoon, and as we chatted, she mentioned something that hit me like a punch to the gut. "Oh, and get this," Leah said, leaning in. "You know your ex-friends, Betrayal and the rest? Word is, they've all been trying to get with Caleb. The same women who used to laugh at your jokes about him are now falling all over themselves to get his attention. A confusing storm of emotions washed over me. Anger at their disloyalty, a sharp pang of jealousy, and a deep, aching sadness for the man I had so publicly ridiculed. Has he shown interest in any of them? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Leah shook her head. Not from what I've heard. He's been keeping to himself. Seems more confident, somehow. More solid. I nodded, a small, sad smile tugging at my lips. That sounded right. Caleb was using this adversity as a catalyst for his own growth. Her words were painful, but they also solidified a new friendship, one based on honesty and mutual respect. For the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of a genuine connection, a small light in the lonely world I now inhabited. The seasons turned. Summer bled into a crisp, golden autumn, and the one-year anniversary of that terrible day at the barbecue approached. I had settled into a new rhythm of life. My job at the marketing firm had evolved into a more challenging role, and I was thriving on the responsibility. My relationship with my parents had improved dramatically as they saw the genuine changes I was making. My friendship with Leah had blossomed into a true, supportive connection. But despite these positive changes, there was still a Caleb-shaped hole in my heart. I missed him with a dull, persistent ache that never quite went away, a constant reminder of what I had carelessly destroyed. It was on one of those perfect autumn days, the air smelling of wood smoke and decaying leaves, that I ran into him. I was leaving my favorite coffee shop, a stack of work files tucked under one arm and a warm latte in my other hand. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, my mind already on the presentation I had to prepare, when I quite literally bumped into someone entering the shop. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, juggling my coffee and trying to keep the files from spilling all over the sidewalk. I wasn't watching where I was. I looked up to apologize properly, and the words died in my throat. I was looking into a pair of achingly familiar brown eyes. "Caleb," I breathed, feeling as if all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "Alara," he replied, his voice soft with an uncertainty that mirrored my own. He looked good. He'd always been handsome, but now there was a new confidence about him, a quiet self-assurance in the way he held himself. He was leaner, and his hair was cut shorter. He looked like himself, but a version that was more grounded, more whole. "Here, let me help you with that," he said, reaching out to steady my coffee cup. His fingers brushed against mine for a brief electric moment. The slight accidental touch sent a jolt through my system, a phantom limb remembering a connection it had long since lost. "Thank you," I managed to say, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. How are you?" He smiled, a small, genuine smile that still had the power to make my knees feel weak. "I'm doing well," he said. "How about you? Leah mentioned you've been working at Millbrook Marketing." The fact that he knew this, that he had asked about me, made my pulse quicken. "Yes, I have," I replied, finding my footing. "It's been challenging, but in a good way. I'm learning a lot." "That's great, Alara. I'm happy for you," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. An awkward silence fell between us, thick with everything left unsaid. There were a million apologies I wanted to make, 1,000 things I wanted to tell him, but the words were stuck in my throat, a tangled knot of regret and hope. "Listen," Caleb said, finally breaking the silence. He ran a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture of nervousness that I knew so well. I was just about to grab a coffee. Would you like to join me?" "To catch up." The offer took me by surprise. For a moment, I was transported back to our college days, when we would spend hours in coffee shops, talking about everything and nothing, but we weren't those carefree kids anymore. We were two adults, with a painful, complicated history between us. "Are you sure?" I asked hesitantly. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable." His smile was gentle. "I'm sure. I think it might be good for us to talk." And so, with a stomach full of butterflies and a heart full of a feeling I didn't dare name, I followed him back into the warmth of the coffee shop. We found a quiet corner booth, the worn leather cool against my skin. For a few long moments, we just sat there, our hands wrapped around steaming mugs, the weight of our shared history hanging heavy in the air between us. "So," Caleb began, his voice soft but steady, "how have you really been, Alara?" I took a deep breath, deciding in that moment to be completely, brutally honest. "It's been hard," I admitted, my eyes fixed on the swirling pattern in my latte. "Losing you, realizing how badly I'd messed up, it was like waking up from a long, selfish dream. But it's also been eye-opening. I've learned a lot about myself, about the kind of person I want to be. He nodded, his eyes never leaving my face. I can see that. You seem different, more grounded. I'm trying to be, I said, a small, watery smile touching my lips. I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Larson. She's been helping me work through, well, a lot of my issues. That's great, Alara, Caleb said, and I could hear the genuine pride in his voice. I'm proud of you for taking that step. His words, so simple and sincere, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered. Caleb, I am so sorry for everything. I know I said it in a text, but I need you to hear it from me. I need you to know how deeply I regret the way I treated you. You deserve so much better. He reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. His touch was warm and steady. I appreciate that, Alara. Really, I do. And I forgive you. I looked up at him, my vision blurred, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. You do? He nodded, a small, kind smile playing on his lips. I do. It hasn't been easy, and it took a lot of time and my own therapy sessions, to be honest. But I've come to a place where I can honestly say I forgive you. Holding on to that anger and hurt, it wasn't good for me. It was only poisoning my own future. A weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying lifted from my shoulders. It was a profound, cleansing release. Thank you, I said, my voice choked with emotion. That means more to me than you'll ever know. We spent the next hour just talking, catching up, sharing stories about our separate lives over the past year. He told me about his promotion at work, his newfound passion for rock climbing, and the stray cat he'd adopted. I told him about my job, my volunteer work at the animal shelter, and my budding friendship with Leah. The conversation was easy, natural, and tinged with a bittersweet ache for what could have been. As we stood to leave, I knew this wasn't a prelude to getting back together. Too much had happened, too much trust had been broken. This was something different. This was closure. This was nice, Caleb said as we stood outside the shop, the autumn air cool on our faces. I'm glad we ran into each other. Me too, I replied, smiling through the tears that threatened to fall. Caleb, I know things can never go back to the way they were, but do you think we could be friends? He was quiet for a moment, considering my question seriously. Then he smiled, that warm, genuine smile that had always made my heart skip a beat. I'd like that, Alara, he said. I think we could try. As we said our goodbyes and went our separate ways, a whirlwind of emotions swirled within me, a deep, lingering sadness for what we had lost, a quiet joy for this new, fragile beginning, and a cautious hope for what the future might hold. Walking home that evening, the crunch of fallen leaves under my boots provided a steady rhythm for my thoughts. I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. I had lost so much: my marriage, my home, my friends, my sense of self. But in losing those things, I had gained something far more valuable: self-awareness, personal growth, and the chance to become a better person. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Building a friendship with Caleb would require patience, understanding, and a level of emotional maturity I was still working to cultivate. There would be awkward moments, painful reminders of our past, and the constant, tempting whisper of hope for more. I had to be strong enough to accept what we could have, not what I wished we had. I had made mistakes, big, life-altering ones. I had hurt the person I loved most in the world and had taken for granted the countless blessings in my life. But I had also learned from those mistakes. I had faced the ugly, selfish parts of myself and had committed to a lifelong process of change. And in doing so, I had discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. As I reached the front door of my apartment, my own place, paid for with my own hard-earned money, I paused, looking back at the path that had led me here. I felt a surge of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, however painful they had been. Gratitude for the people, like my parents and Leah, who had stood by me even when I didn't deserve it. And gratitude for second chances, not just with Caleb, but with myself. I entered my small, cozy apartment, kicking off my shoes and settling onto the couch. The space was a reflection of the new me, simple, uncluttered, and peaceful. As I drifted off to sleep that night, curled under a soft blanket, I made a promise to myself. A promise to never again take for granted the people in my life. A promise to always strive to be better, to be kinder, to be more understanding, And most importantly, a promise to love myself enough to never settle for being less than the best version of myself, for me and for no one else. The future was uncertain, a blank page waiting to be written. But for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready to begin.